Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Jindal Global Law School lecture series. I hope all of you are safe and at home. Today we have Professor Prateek Bhattacharya with us. He is an assistant professor and assistant dean at Jindal Global Law School. Professor, I'm glad to invite you today for this webinar. Also, that I would like to inform all the attendees that at the end of the session, I'll be taking up questions for Professor to answer for you. Thank you so much, Professor. Now you can carry on with the lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anshu. Good evening, everyone. As Anshu said, my name is Prateek Bhattacharya. Before joining in the Global Law School, I was practicing as a competition lawyer with Shardul Amachand Mangaldas. So I have a fair amount of industry experience, and I want to talk today about the topic of Facebook data collection and abuse of dominance. Before that, I'd just like to mention that Jindal Global Law School Center for Postgraduate Legal Studies is starting its new LLM degree this year, which is the LLM in competition law. So which is why we are specifically focusing on competition law topics in this particular lecture. And before I go on into the topic of Facebook and Facebook's case last year before the Bundeskartellamt, I want to first cover generally the various concepts, some specific key concepts of competition law, as well as data protection, because a lot of what Facebook's case from last year was regarding data protection. So first, I want to just briefly cover what is the concept of relevant market. Now, for competition law, to find a case to have a violation of competition law, including under the Competition Act of 2002 in India, you need to first establish what is the relevant market of that particular case, of that particular instance. So relevant market is a very useful tool which needs to be defined in order to figure out where is someone dominant, whether someone is dominant at all in the said relevant market. So for a perspective, for relevant market, the narrower you define a relevant market, the easier it is to find someone dominant. So if, for example, I was going to take if I was going to define the relevant market as the number of webinars which are being conducted by the Center for Postgraduate Legal Studies of JGLS at 5 p.m. on Tuesday, the 16th of June, I would be the only player, and therefore I would be dominant. Now, of course, that is a very narrow definition of the relevant market, because of which it leaves only scope for only one person to be dominant. So therefore, the narrower the relevant market definition, the higher the chances of finding someone dominant in that narrow relevant market. However, in contrast, where if you have a wider definition of relevant market, if you, for example, see all the webinars which have been conducted by everyone in this week, starting 15th of June 2020, then there will be various webinars, and therefore there will be a lot of players involved. So the broader the relevant market, the more the number of players involved. Relevant market is a very important tool for competition law, particularly for abuse of dominance cases. And I'm just mentioning what relevant market is at the beginning, because a lot of this case depends upon the definition of relevant market. The next concept to discuss is dominance. So dominance is essentially, very simply put, when you are able to operate independently of other market forces. So you have become such a massive player in that market, in that relevant market, and that you are able to do whatever you want, regardless of other competitors coming into the market, regardless of what the consumers want. So you can, for example, the ability to charge exorbitantly high prices is something which is indicative of a dominant position. Whereas on the other hand, if you have a significant competitor who can cut you short and stop you from charging high prices, then you are not a dominant player. So one example of this is a traditional example of Pepsi and Coca-Cola, where you have two very large, very significant players, both who are stopping each other from becoming dominant. If it were not for Pepsi, Coke would charge their price for their soda products as much as they wanted to, and vice versa for Pepsi. So this is the concept of dominance, the ability to operate independently of all competitive forces in the relevant market. The next concept that I want to discuss is that of market share. Now, market share is, again, and this is a very important point to keep in mind, that market share is an indication of dominant position, but it is never proof. It is never beyond reasonable doubt proof of dominance. Now, having a higher market share, that is having a higher share of that relevant market, is indicative of the fact that you are in a position to dictate terms without listening to anyone, to basically behave independently or to behave in a dominant manner. So market share is therefore a tool which competition lawyers, which particularly regulators such as the Competition Commission of India use as an indicator to look at which areas, which companies, which entities may be in a dominant position or may be in a position of market power. Now, so if you have market share, if you have high market share, it's an indication that you're dominant. Now, whether or not you're abusing dominance is an entirely different question altogether. And this is a core principle to always keep in mind. Being dominant is not bad. Abusing your dominant position is what creates problems. So therefore, if I am merely dominant by way, and I'm able to prove that I was dominant by way of being the most efficient player in the market, and I did nothing wrong, then I am not abusing my dominance. And if my terms and conditions are fair, if I'm not excessively pricing anyone for my products, for my merchandise, then I am not abusing my dominant position. So you need to always keep in mind that dominance is good, or dominance is not necessarily bad. Rather, I wouldn't say dominance is good, but dominance is not necessarily bad, but it is the abuse of dominance which is bad. Similarly, if you have engaged in anti-competitive conduct, if for example you have been engaging in predatory pricing and you're cutting your prices really low in order to get to your dominant position, then that is also bad. So that is also known as monopolization. So the process of monopolization, where you are in illegal or anti-competitive conduct to become a dominant entity, can also be bad. And in all cases of competition law, a principal point which we need to always remember is that you need to look at the effects of the case, particularly in dominance cases. You need to see whether the situation is such that there is actually an anti-competitive effect which is resulting. So it's not a prima facie opinion. It's not it feels like dominance. It feels like there's an abuse. You have to prove without reasonable doubt that there is an abuse of dominance that has happened. Now, moving on to specifically about this case we are talking about data collection and the exploitation resulting from data collection. So I want to first discuss exploitation before I continue. Exploitation is essentially stems from section 4 subsection 2 clause A subclause 1 of the Competition Act, which talks about unfair terms and conditions. Now, if you have an unfair terms and condition and you are a dominant player, you are basically coercing the other side, the consumer or the whoever you're contracting with, to accept your terms and conditions regardless of whether they are fair or unfair, and therefore you are exploiting your dominant position versus their inability to negotiate with you. So that is exploitation, and that stems from section 4 subsection 2 clause A subclause 1 of the Competition Act of 2002. Two other points which are important to cover before I jump into this case are network effects and entry barriers. The easiest way to explain network effects is, for example, fax machines, which most of us have heard about, but very few of us have ever used, because fax machines became old 15, 20 years ago. Now, the reason why fax machines have become redundant today is because no one has a fax machine. And the utility of having a fax machine depends on how many other people also have a fax machine. You can't fax a document to anyone if that other person doesn't have a fax machine. So that is network effects, where the success of a particular instrument or the success of a particular software, or in Facebook's case, the success of the social network depends on how many people are on that social network. If all of you and all of your friends were not on Facebook, then you would not have used Facebook. So the reason why Facebook is such a big thing is because everyone we know is on Facebook, and therefore it has very strong network effects. But having strong network effects also means that it's very difficult for a new player to break into that market, because everyone is so happy with Facebook and everyone is on Facebook that if tomorrow I go up to my friend and I tell him that, listen, there is this new software, this new app that I've heard about, which is exactly like Facebook, I think we should try it out. His simple response will be, why will I use it? There is no one else on that app. Everyone is on Facebook. So therefore network effects prevails, and it prevents It creates an entry barrier for other people from joining the from entering the market. Now, these are our competition law principles. In addition to this, I also want to clarify certain data protection principles which are relevant for this case. So, some of you or all of you may be aware of the GDPR, which is the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, which are basically the guidelines which lay down the guidelines for entities, for including companies, for collecting and processing of personal data. So the data which we submit to Facebook, for example, the guidelines for how to collect and how to process their data is something which Facebook has to follow as per the GDPR, which came into effect in the beginning of 2018, I think February or March of 2018. Now, India's equivalent of that is the Personal Data Protection Bill, which is unfortunately it's still a bill and it's pending before Parliament. The Personal Data Protection Bill was prepared and was brought before was tabled before Parliament in 2019, and perhaps after the lockdown lifts in India, we will see Parliament make that into legislation. But the equivalent of the GDPR is essentially the PDP bill, that is the Personal Data Protection Bill. Now, coming to the case which we have to talk about today. On 6th of February 2019, which was a little over a year ago, the Bundeskartellamt, basically, which is the German Competition Authority, it is the German equivalent of the Competition Commission of India, the Bundeskartellamt, that they after a culmination of an investigation for 3 years against Facebook, they found Facebook to be abusing its dominance on the allegation that it was using Facebook was using its services in a conditional manner, and that its services was conditional on the collection of user data and device related data by Facebook without users' consent. Now I'll break this down further. So the first thing that we're looking at is that Facebook was combining data from its own website and from its own apps. Now we know that Facebook has, of course, within the umbrella of Facebook, you have facebook.com, the social networking website, which all of us with most of us at least, are a member of. I know that I left it a couple of years ago. So my information about how Facebook functions might be a little dated. Please excuse me on that. So there's facebook.com, the social networking website. There is Instagram and there is WhatsApp. There are also other apps such as Oculus, which I won't go into because that's not as relevant from a social networking perspective. So Facebook has the data which you willingly consent to through its own websites or its own apps. So facebook.com, Instagram, WhatsApp. And it was combining this data which it got from third-party apps which used what's known as Facebook business tools. I'll define Facebook business tools later, but suffice it to say for now that Facebook tools refers to a means or a mechanism which allows business users also to use Facebook to be able to market their product on the Facebook platform or via the Facebook utilities. So first point is that Facebook was, without taking any consent, was combining the data which we had willingly given with the data which we had no idea was being collected and was being shared with Facebook. Second point, that there was no effective consent from the users for this combination. So that's what I just mentioned. The third was that the users are required to give consent at what point? Only at the very beginning. So they give consent right at the time of subscription to facebook.com, which are also known as EULAs or end user license agreements or click wrap agreements, where basically most of us don't go through the legalese, and despite most of us studying law or being a law or already having finished studying law, most of us don't read those terms and conditions and we just say I agree or I accept without thinking twice. So those are end user license agreements, and we have given our consent by way of that. But our consent is restricted to facebook.com or to WhatsApp or to Instagram. However, here they're expanding it to third parties also, which is what the problem of this particular case is. Now, as I mentioned with regard to the consent which we are given, we are giving this consent also only at the time of registration, which is another problem which the Bundeskartellamt pointed out. That at the very beginning, when you say I accept or yes or I agree, you don't really know what you are saying yes to. And you are coerced by the fact, in Facebook's case, you are coerced by the fact that all of your friends are on Facebook, that there is a network effect and there is no better social network out there than Facebook. Now, what was the Bundeskartellamt's opinion? That in response to the fact And obviously every social network platform, any app nowadays, if you have a case against Google, against Amazon, against Facebook, all of them will say that we are collecting this data for the purposes of being efficient, and it's part of our business model. To which the Bundeskartellamt said that wherever you are talking about efficiency in a business model, which is based on personalized advertising, because Facebook does have personalized advertising, as does Instagram. So you will see always on the right side, or in the case of Instagram, in the middle of your feed, you will see that there are advertisements also which come up. So wherever the business model is based on personalized advertising, which is based on collecting personalized data about you, then that does not outweigh the user's own privacy and their own interests, where insofar as you are collecting data from outside of the Facebook domain. So even though you are using Instagram, you are happening to be also browsing Amazon and looking at, say, t-shirts which you want to purchase, and suddenly you find that your Instagram feed also has t-shirt advertisements in it. So that is an example of an unauthorized combination of two different sources of data, of your own personal data. So in such a case, this is where the Bundeskartellamt found that there was a problem, because it was outside information that Facebook was using. And this was particularly where users had little to no control over the processing of their data, which means that the users had no idea and had no control over what Facebook was doing and how it was going about combining and doing a permutation and combination with their own data. And this was found to be in violation of the GDPR. Now let's go a little further into this case. So what are the various facts of the case, or how exactly does Facebook work? How does Facebook collect data? That's of course what this case is about. So it's important that we discuss it. So all of us know we are all essentially what is referred to in Facebook's own terminology as private users. You have a Facebook account. I had a Facebook account. Others have Facebook accounts. So all of us are private users, and we are private in our capacity as private users. We use Facebook.com. We use Facebook Messenger, which is based on Facebook, but is also operates independently, because you can download Facebook Messenger as an independent app. Then we also use WhatsApp. We also use Instagram. So those are the private users of these apps. Additionally, businesses can also use Facebook to publish content to increase their outreach, in order to be able to sell their products better. So businesses can also use Facebook. Now, Facebook also funds its social network through online advertising, which it offers to publishers and other businesses, where the ads match a social network user's individual profile, with the aim of presenting ads which are potentially interesting to them, which are basically what happens is Facebook collects data from all of us. It might be browser data, it might be purchasing power data, it might be living conditions, it might be information, and the living conditions might be, or our purchasing power might be a calculation based on, in the last year, how many foreign countries did we travel to. So using that, Facebook might have an approximate calculation of how much money do we have based on how often we travel. So and that is information which it provides to publishers, and they have targeted advertisements meant for us based on our history, based on our preferences. Essentially, Facebook is able to create a virtual profile of all of us based on our activity, and this therefore enables them to do targeted advertising. And this targeted advertising is where they get most of their money. Now, what essentially what this means is, although Facebook is free to us in terms of monetary terms, in terms of how much money comes out of our wallet, it is not free in terms of our data. We are providing our data in return for this supposedly free service. Now, Facebook also, this is the funding angle. Now, Facebook offers Facebook business tools, which I discussed earlier. Now, what are Facebook business tools? These are free tools and products for website operators, developers, advertisers, and businesses to integrate their own websites and apps via APIs, which are application programming interfaces. For example, what I'm talking about is that if you're on a third-party website and you see that Facebook like button or the Facebook share button, that is essentially the third-party website providing a link between themselves and between Facebook. And that is the data which Facebook was collecting without the user's permission. The fact that even though you are not logged into Facebook, even though you weren't signed on in Facebook, that when you are looking at a third-party app which was connected to Facebook by way of these Facebook business tools, that they therefore provided this information back to Facebook about you, about your browsing preferences. So Facebook therefore claims that this accumulate. Now, of course, Facebook's defense was that we need this data in order to provide the service, the great service that we provide, and that it's therefore required in order to fulfill Facebook's legitimate interests. But of course, the Bundeskartellamt said that as I mentioned earlier, that where the collection of data is itself based on an advertising, targeted, personalized advertising model, and what is being put at risk is your private data, then it cannot be said to be okay. Now we come to the next point of market definition. Now in market definition, the geographic market is, of course, you always have, when you're defining relevant market definition, there's a product market and there's a geographic market. So the geographic market is usually easier to define because you look at which area is it affecting. So because the Bundeskartellamt, being the German competition authority, was looking at the effects which was caused on the people, the users in Germany, Germany became the geographic market. The relevant product market was defined as a social network financed through targeted advertising. And the reason why this was so was because the multi-sided nature of Facebook was because of this form of financing, that basically, now you think, now just to take a step back, sets of people who use that platform. So Facebook.com, the website or the app, which all of us, which you may have, that you see only your friends who are there on the Facebook app. So you are the same level, you're the same side of the platform, but there are other sides. For example, you are the private users, then there are the advertisers, which is another side of the platform. Then there are the publishers who are promoting their own business, who are trying to reach out through their own business page. So for example, you'll have a company, you'll have Adidas, which has its own Facebook page. Like for example, you have OP Jindal Global University also, which has its own Facebook page. So everyone has promoting their respective institutions through Facebook. So that is another side. And then finally, you have the app developers, the people who do the coding and who create the connection between the business side of Facebook and the private side of Facebook. That is between you and between the various institutions like Adidas, which are trying to reach out to you through Facebook. Now, because there are so many sides, all of these sides, the reason why there are so many sides is because of the financing model, because Facebook depends on having so many sides so that it can get money from advertisements. Now, within this market, who all falls? So WhatsApp, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, they are not part of this market because they offer very different services. WhatsApp is a purely messaging service, which is very different from what Facebook does. In Facebook, you can create events, you can create communities, you can create pages, and you can do all of this within the same platform. And you can also share photos, you can check into your location. All of this is not possible on WhatsApp. The purpose of Facebook is a more social and more personal purpose, as opposed to LinkedIn, which is a more professional usage. So again, LinkedIn differs from Facebook on that account. Snapchat and Instagram are primarily photo-based apps and not text-based apps, which Facebook is a combination of both. So therefore, Facebook is different. In addition, of course, Snapchat provides a service which is temporal in nature. That is, the picture doesn't remain forever; it goes away after a fixed period of time. So therefore, these are all very different. Even though all of them might be broadly put under the concept of social network, they do not compete with Facebook because they are very different in how they function. Now, as part of market definition, we also have to consider that, as I said earlier, Facebook has very strong network effects because all of us are on Facebook because all of our friends are on Facebook and all of their friends are on Facebook and all of their friends are on Facebook. So therefore, there are very strong network effects, and it takes a lot for a new player to come in. So as a result, we will be always hesitant to leave Facebook for a new player because we have been locked in as users, and therefore Facebook relies on this locking in to be able to be dominant in the social networking market. A best case example is that all of us probably have Google accounts, all of us have Gmail accounts, but none of us ever use Google Plus or barely use Google Plus. And because of that, even though Google Plus, despite being such a behemoth, such a huge tech giant, Google Plus died a few months after this case of Bundeskartellamt. It basically died in April of 2019. So you could see that it was impossible to penetrate the market because of the strong network effects that Facebook had. Now this is market definition. Now let's move on to the market dominance. Now Facebook has a, briefly put, Facebook's dominant position is because it has market power, which cannot be sufficiently controlled by competition. Basically, Facebook is able to operate independently of all competitors entering or leaving the market. Google Plus came, Google Plus went, but it could not compete with Facebook. So that shows that Facebook is in a position that it can do whatever it wants, regardless of what the users, what you and I might complain. So even after the Cambridge Analytica scandal, even then Facebook is such a popular service, which proves its dominance, and that other players have tried to come in and take its position to replace it, but they have failed. The next point to see for market dominance and is market share, which, as I mentioned earlier, is only an indication. So the Bundeskartellamt looked at market share and it found that amongst the daily active users of Facebook, daily active users of social networks, Facebook had 95% market share. Then it had 80% amongst monthly active users and above 50% amongst registered users. And what it used as a metric for calculation of the market share was the amount of time that users spend intensively using the network. And on this basis, it found over 50%, in fact, 85 to 95% in most cases of daily usage. Then moving on, what is the kind of data that Facebook has? Facebook has what is known as competitively relevant data, which facilitated highly personalized advertising when combined with network effects, which meant that there was a clear barrier to market entry by a competing social network. Now that seems a little complicated, so let me break that down. So the fact that Facebook has access to all of our data and is able to do targeted advertising based on all of our personalized data, combined with the fact that no one else that we know uses any other social networking app, a substitute for Facebook, like say WeChat, which is there in China. Therefore, Facebook is dominant, and the fact that it is dominant, the fact that it provides all of these services, and somewhere deep down inside, we all like the fact that there are these targeted ads because we know that there's a sale going on for the t-shirts which I wanted to buy. So therefore, all of these combine to form very strong network effects, and they prevent anyone else like a Google Plus from coming and staying in the market, which basically means that this dominance, this strong network effects creates a clear barrier to market entry by a competing social network. And Google Plus is again a prime example of that. So we have now, the Bundeskartellamt has established the relevant market. It has established dominance, and now we will move on to the abuse of dominance. And when it was coming to the abuse of dominance, what the Bundeskartellamt did was it relied on the violation of data protection laws. That basically Facebook was abusing its dominance by way of an abusive data policy or data collection or data processing policy. So what it found was that Facebook's collection of the user and the user data, so there is user data and there's device related data. They're two different things. So for example, when you log what the information which you willingly give Facebook, for example, your date of birth or your relationship status or where you have worked or where you have studied, all of this is data which you have given to Facebook. Then there's also device related data which you are also consenting to because it's there in the end user license agreement, it's there in the ClickWrap agreement, which is device related data, which is basically when I am using my phone every morning to check the weather and to check how hot it will be or whether it will rain today, then I'm switching on location. And when I switch on that location, then Facebook gets an idea of where I am based on information which the device is getting through some other app. So that is also a part of what we have given consent to. So this is the user or device related data which can exist, which can directly exist to Facebook and can also exist via third-party sources. So the problem was the merging of this user data and the third-party data combined without any full or effective consent. Effective consent is an important term because that basically means that we didn't know what we were saying yes to. Effective consent is different from clarifies that we're not just talking about saying yes. It's also an informed consent where we can understand what we're saying yes to. So the fact that it was merging all of this without our consent, without our effective consent, amounted to unfair terms and conditions, which as we saw, which as I mentioned in section 4 and in the European Union, it's article 102 of the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union, amounts to an exploitative business term. Now, what does that mean? I'll explain the exploitation point just shortly. Now, why was it an exploitative business term? Because there was a violation which Facebook had committed of the GDPR and of the German Civil Code, as per which an agreement becomes abusive if the terms and conditions are a manifestation of market power or superior bargaining power. That basically what is a normal contract, what is a run-of-the-mill contract, attracts greater scrutiny where you have a dominant player, which is, for example, why you have in India, you have dominant players, you have public sector undertakings like Coal India Limited, which are dominant, which are found to have abused its dominance, because what is normally a normal contractual term, apologies for the repetition, what is a normal contractual term, the moment you're a dominant player, you are held to a higher standard, so you have a higher responsibility. So the moment you are manifesting your market power in a way which seems unfair or abusive, then it is a problem under competition law. So what the Bundeskartellamt held was that Facebook is so powerful that it can practically dictate the terms of the contract and thus has contractual autonomy, resulting in a unilateral contract. Meaning that Facebook is able to put whatever it wants in its terms and conditions, in what we say yes to blindly without reading, and we will never be in a position to contest it because they have contractual autonomy and because it amounts to a unilateral contract. Now this is therefore an abuse of dominance, and this is what amounts to exploitation. Facebook users, the Bundeskartellamt also held that Facebook users should ideally have the option to choose what the third-party data is being processed by Facebook, and should have access to all such data to share with the competitor. Basically, what that means is that I should have, as a Facebook user, the option to opt out of Facebook using third-party data. So no, I don't want Facebook to be accessing using the data which it gets from Amazon and putting that into my feed, because I end up buying a lot. So I should have the option to exercise that and the option to opt out. And similarly, I should also have the option to access all of this data wherever it's stored. Like, imagine that all of your data is put in one USB drive, and then you are able to give that USB drive to another company. You are able to give a copy to another company because that is your data. So you should be able to do whatever you want with that data and give it to another company, and there should be no problem, because that should allow the competing company, Facebook's competitor, to be able to function. So therefore, what the Bundeskartellamt ordered was that Facebook has to cease and desist. It had to cease and desist combining its user data with its third-party data, which it was bundling. So therefore, what the Bundeskartellamt ordered was an unbundling of this data. Now, of course, as anyone would, as any normal company would, they appealed. So they appealed to a court which is known as the Oberlandesgericht in Düsseldorf, which translates to the Higher Regional Court of Düsseldorf. Now there are 24 such regional courts in Germany, each overseeing a particular area. Düsseldorf just happened to be the area where Facebook is registered in, so they filed their appeal there. And Facebook filed its appeal, and in a few months later, so as you would remember, in February 2019 is when the Bundeskartellamt passed its order. So on the 26th of August 2019 is when the Higher Regional Court of Düsseldorf passed its order, its interim order suspending the Bundeskartellamt's order. So it disagreed with the Bundeskartellamt, and it said that we do not believe prima facie that Facebook has abused its dominance, and we therefore suspend all the sanctions which you imposed on Facebook. Why did they do so? On the following grounds. Number one, they found that there is insufficient evidence which is linking Facebook's collection of data to its alleged dominance. That basically what the Bundeskartellamt had presumed was that its collection of data had led to it being such a dominant enterprise. To which the Higher Regional Court of Düsseldorf held that no, you can't presume that, you need to prove that. You need evidence, you need evidentiary proof and analysis to be able to connect the collection of data to the alleged dominance. The second point was that the Bundeskartellamt cannot assume Facebook's abuse of dominance on the grounds that a different competitor, what in competition law is referred to as a hypothetical competitor or a hypothetical competitor test, that a hypothetical competitor would not have done the same. Because if you have to engage in such a counterfactual analysis that if it was anyone else, then they wouldn't do it. Oh, it is only Facebook, so clearly Facebook had bad intention, which is why only Facebook did it. If it was anyone else in Facebook's place, they would not have done it. Except in order to prove such a counterfactual analysis, you need to have sufficient investigation, which again, the Bundeskartellamt did not do, did not commit to. So this sounds a lot like, for those of you who have an inkling of how the CCI works, or of the cases which of the CCI which have been overruled by the COMPAT or the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal, the NCLAT, then you will know that this is also a problem which the CCI often faces, one of insufficient investigation or lack of evidence. So it's a little comforting to know that it's not just in India that this happened; it happens in all around the world, including in developed countries. So because there was insufficient evidence, there wasn't really enough proof to show that there was dominance or that there had been abuse of dominance. In addition, the higher regional court of Düsseldorf held that there had been no anti-competitive harm which had been caused because the consumers, the users, you and I did not lose our data, and we are free to share this data, to give our information, our information about date of birth, about our first school, about our first job, about where we've traveled to, all of these details. We can share it with any other social network also. It's not as if it is Facebook's property. No, it's still very much our property. And therefore, we haven't, it's not as if we've lost out by sharing that information with Facebook. Third, that no anti-competitive, fourth point, not third point, fourth point, that data processing is a voluntary consideration for free and non-indispensable service. That basically no one is holding a gun to your head when to sign on to Facebook, and it's and it's not an essential service. It is a free service and something which you are completely at free at your free choice to opt out of. So there is no question of exploitation where it is completely possible for you to not even subscribe to Facebook. Yes, there is peer pressure, but peer pressure is not a legal ground to hold Facebook to be dominant, to hold Facebook as exploiting their supposedly dominant position. Then the fifth point was that the idea that access to data itself, and this is an important one because this is what is really the takeaway from today's lecture. The idea that access to data creates a barrier to entry requires a much closer examination and a much more detailed explanation than was given by the Bundeskartellamt. And it hasn't gone into detail. If you read the case, the Bundeskartellamt's decision is about 12 pages, which is very less but for any standards of a competition law case, and there is no economic analysis even in that case. So this idea that access to data itself is an automatic barrier to entry is maybe true, but it may also not be true. And I don't know, that depends on how detailed the investigation is. It depends on how the data is, what the data is, and who else can avail of that data. Then the final reason for overruling the Bundeskartellamt's decision was that the violation of the data privacy rules, that is the GDPR in Europe, does not automatically mean abuse of dominance. And also, the competition authorities in the European Union are not the appropriate regulator to be hearing data privacy violations. There are regulators for that. So therefore, you cannot mix data privacy and anti-competitive effect. The other, what this basically means is that where there is a violation of data privacy, where there is a violation of the GDPR in EU or in India of the protection of data, of the PDP bill, which is going to be the PDP Act. Those are violations in rem because they affect the general public. That what Facebook is doing did not affect one or two individuals, it affected everyone. Whereas what the argument which was being made here were more of in personam arguments, that basically there are specific individuals who are being affected. And while competition law is both in rem, is definitely an in rem law, that basically you are looking to exclude that person from harming anyone else in the society, in the community, in the public. what the arguments which the Bundeskartellamt was making was very close to an in personam, a personal argument, as if there had been one person who had been gravely harmed by Facebook's conduct. So that basically concludes the case as to whether was there even a competition law issue, because it appears to be more of a data protection issue or more of a privacy issue. And when we bring that law, that act, and there are some very interesting points which have come up because of this case, because the question of access to data being an entry barrier, the question of the right of the ability to exploit based on being a dominant player in a multi-sided platform, that's also a new concept. So all of this, if you bring it back to India and we apply section 4 subsection 2 clause A subclause 1, and we see that yes, section 4 does allow for such exploitation, but the question of access to data still remains open, because we still have to prove, the Competition Commission of India, if they were to hear a case, I don't know what would happen, because it would depend on how much investigation, how much data the Facebook would be able to provide to the Competition Commission of India, and similarly how much how in detail or how in depth the investigation of the CCI was, and that will really amount to was the data which was used something which no one else had. Then if there's a proprietary nature to the data, then yes, there may be an abuse of dominance case. So that is one issue, the question of data of access to data as a form of exploitation. The other issue is a jurisdictional conflict, because if as and when the PDP bill becomes an act, then we are dealing with a new regulator, which is a data protection authority, who is supposed to oversee the obligations of companies, which is basically like Facebook, which are known as data fiduciaries under the Data Protection Act, under the PDP. Then these data fiduciaries are obligated to process the data for a specific, clear and lawful purpose, while also being transparent and accountable to the individual user, which means that you and I, as individual users, as data principals in legal terminology, have the right to know which data of ours is being processed by whom, and to decide which data we want processed and which data we do not want processed. And the reason why this becomes a jurisdictional issue is because all of this is supposed to be done by the Data Protection Authority. And it's only when the Data Protection Authority feels that there is a competition law issue, does the competition law come into play, Competition Commission come into play. And this is where sections 21 and 21A of the Competition Act of 2002 come into existence. Section 21 allows for a statutory authority, such as say the Data Protection Authority, to refer a matter to the CCI where there is a competition law issue. And similarly, if the CCI gets a case which it considers to be as a case regarding data protection, data privacy violation, then the CCI should ideally, under section 21A, refer that case to the DPA, to the Data Protection Authority, saying, first you look at it. I'm not specialized in this area. I'm kind of outside the scope of my jurisdiction. So first you have a look and let me know what the data privacy or data protection violation angles are. And only then will we be able to come to a conjoint opinion as to whether or not there has been a violation of data privacy law, or whether there's been a violation of competition law. Now, these are basically, this concludes what I wanted to talk about, my lecture, before I throw the floor open for questions and answers. But of course, if you find these topics interesting, and if you want to explore this further, if you want to know what happens, which regulator is supposed to hear which kind of case, and what exploitation or what abuse of dominance amounts to, then Jindal Global Law School's LLM in competition law would be most definitely a suitable option for you. Now, throwing the floor open for questions. Anshu, are there any particular questions which have come across?
Yes, Professor, we do have a lot of questions for you to answer. So also that some students wanted to know about the competition law LLM specialization. So if you can brief them about a bit about our competition law specialization, that would be great.
Sure. So The first thing is that for any LLM which is administered by any university in India, you have to follow the UGC norms, which means that there are 3 compulsory courses which you have to do. Those are the core courses of law and justice in the globalizing world, legal research methodology, and comparative public law. So those is compulsory. Now the specializations which this LLM in competition law offers, and they'll be in the form of electives which you can bid for, is there is a course on fundamentals of competition law, which is meant to be a base course, which will also be a compulsory course for you for this particular LLM, so that your basics of competition law are clear. Then other courses include a course called a practitioner's approach to competition law, which will discuss from a practitioner's perspective how to read the Competition Act and how to read the various cases. So there'll be a lot of economics in that course. There will be a lot of discussion on how the CCI functions as well. So I myself have taught this course. I teach this elective, so it's possible that I may be teaching this elective were you to take this. Were you to enroll yourself in our LLM. The other courses which are available is there's a course on competition law in the digital economy, which all these multi-sided platforms, big data, access to data, all of these terms is something which will be covered in the course of competition law and the digital economy. And we will also have a course called it will be called competitive dimensions of mergers and acquisitions, but what it really means is merger control, because competition law in India or any part of the world is broadly divided into 2 halves. There is there's the enforcement half, which is sections 3 and 4 of the Competition Act, and there is the merger control half, which is sections 5 and 6 of the Competition Act. So merger control talks about, so you will be dealing with cases such as Facebook's acquisition of WhatsApp, and it wasn't notified before the Competition Commission of India because of it fell below the merger deal value thresholds, but it was notified to the European Commission. So we'll be looking at that case. You'll be looking at some high-profile mergers such as the Sun Pharma Ranbaxy merger of 2015, the Dow DuPont merger, the various agricultural mergers which have taken place over the last couple of years. You'll be looking at, for example, Apple's acquisition of Shazam, which happened, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. I'm not sure of the exact date. So all of these various cases and how, when you are looking at merger control, how to approach competition law. So these are the various things, these are the various courses broadly which we'll be covering in the LLM in competition law.
Thank you, Professor, for introducing the competition law specialization. Also, the next question is from Pushkar, and he says that people advertise on Instagram, rendering it into a two-sided market as well. Shouldn't it be classified in the same market as Facebook?
You're very correct, Pushkar. Like Facebook, Instagram is also now a multi-sided platform, but it is not in the same market as Facebook because Instagram's product, the fact that there are only images which are uploaded and we scroll through images is very different from what Facebook offers. Facebook is both images and text, and it also offers the option of creating pages, which also say on Instagram, but you can have members of those pages rather than followers in Instagram. You can create events also, which is something which is unique to Facebook but not on Instagram. So therefore, Facebook and Instagram are different from each other, and they're consciously so because, of course, both are owned by Facebook. So Facebook doesn't want to have one side which is dealing with text and events and communities and Facebook community pages and etc., and it has another which is dealing with photos. So Facebook is very consciously made the two complementary to each other, which is why you can, when you're uploading a picture on Instagram, you can also automatically upload it onto your Facebook profile. So you are correct, but you have to look at the functionalities of the respective functionalities of Facebook and Instagram.
Thank you, Professor. So the next question is from Philip, and he says that Jio and Facebook have partnered. Can Facebook share users' data with Jio in compliance with relevant competition laws? Conversely, can Jio be charged with the relevant laws for using Facebook's user data?
I was wondering if that question would come. Yes and yes. Both can be found. Essentially, it is possible, and I would be very surprised if it is not the case, that Facebook would be sharing its personal information to the user data with Jio as a form of investment, particularly given that Jio is also coming out with an Amazon Amazon competitor, because Jio's come out in fact with Jio Mart, which is a competitor to Amazon and Flipkart and even Big Basket, because there are groceries also involved. So yes, it is completely possible that Facebook is sharing that data. I don't know that. I'm just guessing. But of course, we will have to see on whether there is a case which is filed against them. I know that both that this particular investment of Facebook in Jio is currently it's been notified to the CCI and it's pending before the CCI. So we'll have to wait and see as to what the CCI finds and what it says in its order.
Thank you, Professor, for the answer. Next question is from Sukriti, and she says, why don't we effectively understand the terms and conditions of the end user agreement? Apart from mentioning the details of its operations, what changes should Facebook make to the end user agreement to make it effective for the users? Thank you.
So why we don't read the end user license agreement? I mean, that's a question for everyone. Maybe we're lazy. Maybe we don't want to go through the legalese, despite all of us here being trained in law. Or maybe we just think we've read it once and we think everyone does a copy paste of the same. So I don't have any reason on that. It's more of a sociological and psychological answer as to why we don't read the EULA, the end user license agreement. Now, what Facebook can do, now let's assume that we have given active consent to that. The issue is not what we gave active consent to. The issue is, and this happened, if you remember, 4 or 5 years ago, Facebook was required to start updating any change in its terms and conditions, because that basically meant that they have now changed what we had originally agreed to, and therefore now we have to give a continuous consent to what we had agreed to. So that is one half of the answer. The other half of the answer as to what Facebook must do is that when it comes to this particular case, we were talking about third-party data. Now that is something which none of us really knew that Facebook was collecting. So while we might have ignorantly or knowingly known what we were consenting to when signing up to Facebook, we had no idea about the third-party cases. So which is why in those instances, it is important for Facebook to tell you, and yes, there is a huge cost to Facebook, a lot of work which they have to do, aside from, I'm guessing, operational costs which they will have to engage in. But they will have to basically create a kind of a database which we can access and we can see, oh, okay, this is all the information which Facebook has on me, but I don't want XYZ information to be shared with others, or I don't want this third-party information to be used by Facebook. So every time Facebook is making any change, is accessing data which is outside its Facebook domain, Facebook umbrella, basically, which is outside the umbrella of Facebook.com, Instagram, WhatsApp, then in those cases, Facebook must notify us and must get our express consent. That is one way out, cumbersome way out, but it is, if you want to bother about data privacy, then that is the ideal way out.
Thank you, Professor, for the answer. So the next question is from Meghna, and she says, many websites use cookies to personalize content. Does this have the same nature of Facebook?
Yes. So as part of the end user license agreement of Facebook, cookies are also terms and condition. So Facebook is authorized to use your cookies. Also, when you are using the third-party websites, they also may have a similar policy. So it is through these cookies really that Facebook, that is the connecting link which I was talking about, that is how your third parties are able to tell Facebook about what this person is doing on the third-party website despite not being logged into Facebook.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Professor. So the next question is from Ananya, and she says, the question arises that when Facebook is providing you users and not charging in terms of money but data, won't it justify their act as they sell the data and that's how they earn money? Because at the end of the day, it's a business and they want to earn money.
That's true. We can put it in those simplistic terms, but the issue is when you are paying for a service, say you are paying for for say you're paying for Netflix and you're paying how many ever rupees per month, you know exactly how much you're paying. When it's a question of paying in data, you don't know how much you're paying. So you think it might be just your date of birth and your place of birth and the school which you went to, but there might be other information which you have no idea about, which you're not comfortable with Facebook having access to. Your browsing history is a great example. So you might not. The problem is that yes, it might be theoretically it's okay to pay with data, but you need to know what data of yours you are paying with.
Thank you, Professor. So the next question is from Angad, and he says, can infringement of consumer privacy not be construed as anti-competitive harm?
So Angad, there are various points to that. One is, of course, consumer privacy is something, if you're talking about consumer protection, then there is the consumer protection legislation which you have to go to. And there is, so okay, let me break this down. The first core element which you have to remember is that competition law is meant to improve competition in the market. Now, often means improving the ease for consumers. That essentially, then that is what those are the coattails on which Facebook has survived so far. That it is user friendly and it is beneficial for consumers. But you have to look at the consumers might be happy, but do they know why they are happy? Do they have full knowledge of what they have said yes to? So from a consumer perspective, you have to not only look at whether the consumers are happy, but you also have to look at the larger picture. If you take a step back and look at the structure of the market and not just look at consumer happiness, not just you look at consumer welfare. Yes, the Competition Act is a consumer welfare legislation, but that is not the only thing which it has to look at. It also has to look at what is the level of competition in the market. Is the way that Facebook is functioning, is it not allowing others to come into the social network, into the social network market? And Google Plus again is a great example of that. A tech giant such as Google, with the finances and resources available to it, could not penetrate the social networking market because of the way that Facebook had gone about creating such strong network effects. So that's one part of your answer. The second part of the answer is that whenever you're talking about consumer privacy, you are again looking at a clash of regulators. And as and when the PDP bill becomes an act, then you will have a clash of the Data Protection Authority versus the CCI. So then it will depend on a little bit of an ego battle which is happening. And in India, of course, that it will become an ego battle. And as has happened in the past with the CCI and the TRAI, and with the CCI and the patent controller.
Thank you, Professor, for the answer. And now we are taking our last question of the session. And this is from Amit, and he says, can you please tell us about the recent allegation on Google for abusing its dominance of Google Pay, which CCI is inquiring?
I can't tell you much because it's an allegation. So essentially what the allegation stems from is that Google, see, all of us use Google in our everyday lives, and there is no point in even escaping that fact. All of us, in the fact that we say let's just Google it, the fact that we convert it into a verb means how much we use Google. And a lot of us who have Android phones are based on, Android is of course a Google software. So the allegation is regarding the fact that they are using the Google platform to leverage their already dominant position in the search engine, their already dominant position in the Android market, to enter the UPI market, which is the payment market, through Google Pay. Of course, this is all just an allegation at this point, so I can only circumspect and not go any further.
Thank you so much, Professor, for an enlightening session. Would you like to have an end note for our attendees?
Yes. So just something to go back with is that this is a very dynamically evolving topic which we discussed today. Big data and competition law are two things which are coming to the forefront, and every year, if not every 6 months, the things will change because there's a new order of the European Commission, or there's a new investigation which has been launched by the CCI. So it's very important to stay up to date, and it's also very important to understand the technology and the economics behind which this competition law comes. So whenever you're interested in reading this, just make sure that it's a comprehensive way you're approaching it, and you look at the background of competition law, because what will be the future of these cases is relying on how competition cases were decided in traditional industries, whether those concepts can be applied today. And of course, the last note I want to make is, if you want to learn more, please do enroll with Jindal Global Law School's LLM in competition law. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you so much, Professor. Thank you for joining us today. I would also like to thank all the attendees who joined us today for the session. We'll be getting back to you soon next week. Take care, stay safe, stay home. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.